Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so have you ever stopped to wonder how massive organizations manage to keep track of literally millions of dollars in daily transactions without the whole shebang just falling apart? Today we're exploring the invisible fences these companies build to safeguard their assets, prevent absolutely massive financial errors, and stop fraud right in its tracks. We're going to look at the critical application of internal controls, and specifically, we're diving super deep into a really powerful concept called the segregation of duties.
Okay, let's dive into exactly what we're covering. First, the basics of internal control. Second, the segregation of duties, specifically the ARC framework. Third, a really detailed example looking at the sales cycle. And finally, number 4, another highly detailed example focusing on cash receipts.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the basics of internal control.
So before we look at exactly how duties are divided within a company, we really need a baseline. Internal controls are basically the processes and procedures established to safeguard assets, ensure the accuracy of financial reports, and promote compliance. I actually love to think of these as a vital, living system of checks and balances. By implementing these specific procedures, a well-designed internal control system actively reduces the risk of everyday errors and, crucially, stops individuals from successfully pulling off or hiding fraud.
But listen, there's always a catch to all this security, right? And this cost-benefit comparison really highlights it. When implementing any control, weighing the cost of implementation against the potential benefit is absolutely paramount. Basically, any measure an organization puts in place literally has to be worth the expense, the time and the resources it eats up. I mean, you wouldn't spend $10,000 a month on biometric security scanners to protect a closet full of mops, so organizations have to constantly evaluate whether the money and effort they're spending to set up these controls is truly justified by the actual protection they get.
Moving right along to Section 2, Segregation of Duties, and the ARC framework.
Okay, now we've reached what is basically the absolute golden rule of risk management. We achieve that effective internal control by carefully distributing tasks. The goal? Ensuring that no single person has full control over an entire transaction from start to finish. And that brings us to the ARC framework. For any given transaction, these 3 specific functions really need to be performed by completely separate individuals. You've got authorization of the transaction, record keeping of the transaction, and custody of the assets. ARC. Think about it. If one person can authorize buying a brand new company laptop, write the check to pay for it, and then physically hold on to that laptop, well, they can just take it home. It's a total recipe for disaster. So this ARC memory aid is the critical lens we'll be using for the rest of this explainer.
Now, pause for a second and look at this really fascinating limitation. Internal controls detect fraud by one person, sure, but not by collusion or management override. These controls are brilliantly designed to stop a lone wolf from perpetrating and concealing fraud all on their own. But if 2 people from different departments coordinate an attack to bypass the ARC framework together, say the person authorizing colludes with the person keeping the records, well, the system gets breached. And that is exactly why separating these roles physically and structurally is so incredibly vital.
Let's jump into Section 3, a detailed example focusing on the sales cycle. All right, let's take ARC out of the theoretical textbook and put it into the real world. We're going to follow a real order chronologically. Let's say a customer is ordering a massive batch of high-end industrial servers, from its very inception all the way to the final ledger posting. Just take a look at this flowchart. Every single column here represents a completely separate department: sales, credit, inventory, warehouse, shipping, billing, and so on. This super complex web of separate departments working together securely, this is exactly how massive organizations build those invisible fences we talked about earlier.
Let's walk through those initial steps of a sale. First up, the sales department receives the order for those industrial servers. But, and this is key, sales doesn't get to approve it. Why? Well, they might be tempted to sell to literally anyone just to earn a commission. Instead, the order goes over to the credit department. Credit performs a background check and approves it. By having credit approve the order instead of sales, we're seeing our first ARC component in action: authorization. This securely ensures that goods are only going to legitimate credit-worthy customers. And once authorized, credit notifies everyone by sending approved copies to sales, the warehouse, shipping, and billing.
Okay, let's move along and see how this translates into the physical handling of the product. Now that the order is approved, the inventory warehouse pulls the physical servers off the shelf. They forward them to shipping, who then verifies the items against that approved order. Shipping then generates a packing slip and a bill of lading, which is essentially the legal contract with the freight carrier, before actually sending the goods out the door. Right here, the warehouse and shipping departments are handling the custody portion of ARC. They're in physical possession of the assets, sure, but they can only move them based on that strict authorization they receive from the credit department.
Finally, we absolutely need a rigorous paper trail. After shipment, inventory control updates their records to reflect the pulled goods. Meanwhile, over in the billing department, they match the shipping documents with the approved order and prepare a sequentially numbered invoice. Then accounts receivable posts this to the customer's file. This entire phase, that represents the record-keeping function of ARC. A really great internal control here is billing using those sequentially numbered invoices. Think about it. If invoice 104 and 106 exist in the system, but 105 is just missing, well, auditors immediately know they need to investigate exactly where those missing servers went.
So, to quickly summarize these security checkpoints, the credit department handles authorization, the inventory, warehouse, and shipping handle custody of the physical goods, and billing, along with accounts receivable, handles the record keeping. Because these duties are mapped to completely segregated departments, no single person can just process a fake sale, ship those expensive industrial servers to their own house, and then erase the transaction from the records. It's a brilliant system.
Moving right along to Section 4, a detailed example focusing on cash receipts.
Okay, now that we've successfully sold the servers and billed the customer, let's follow the money. We're going to look at our second incredibly detailed example here, the strict controls around the collection of cash from customer receivables. The absolute second a customer's payment arrives, the controls kick in. The mailroom opens customer mail, but notice step 1. There are always 2 clerks present, always. And as soon as a customer's check is opened, it's immediately endorsed with a stamp reading for deposit only. This is a highly rigorous custody control. By having 2 people present and instantly restricting the check so it can only go into the company's bank account, those funds absolutely cannot be diverted into a single employee's pocket. No way.
Now, you've got to notice the absolute genius separation here between the physical money and the paperwork. The mailroom sends the actual physical checks over to the cash receipts department, who then prepares the deposit slip and takes the money directly to the bank. But, and here's the kicker, the mailroom sends the remittance advices, the paperwork showing who paid what, directly to accounts receivable, so they can update the customer ledgers. Cash receipts never touches the customer account files, and accounts receivable never ever touches the physical checks.
Just look at how the paths diverge here. On the left, the physical check, our custody, is handled exclusively by cash receipts and deposited right in the bank. On the right side, the remittance advice, our record keeping, is handled by accounts receivable to update the accounts. Because the person holding the physical check literally cannot update the accounting records to hide a stolen payment, theft without massive, highly coordinated collusion becomes almost impossible.
Now, what if an organization wants to avoid handling physical checks altogether? Well, there's a really brilliant alternative approach, the lockbox system. Instead of mailing checks to the organization's mailroom, customers send their payments to a special post office box managed directly by the bank. The bank retrieves the payments, deposits the checks immediately, and then simply sends the electronic accounting records back to the company. This completely offloads that initial custody risk directly onto the bank, while also drastically speeding up how fast the company gets its funds. It's a total win-win.
Wow, okay, we've covered a lot of really crucial ground today, from the basic definitions of internal controls to mapping out the entire ARC framework, authorization, record keeping, in custody, across incredibly complex sales and cash collection cycles. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. If you looked really closely at your own organization's transaction life cycles today, would one person currently hold the keys to multiple security checkpoints? Think about how you might apply these very principles to build better invisible fences in your own work. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep learning.